Welcome to podcast Sarah and Michael.
Welcome in, everyone. Grab your coffee, get comfortable, because I am so ready to dive into this material today.
Oh, me too. I mean, the stack of research we have this time is just, well, it's massive. And a huge welcome to you listening.
Yeah, exactly. So glad you're joining us for this deep dive, because, the more I was poring over this, the more my jaw just kind of dropped.
Right. It's one of those topics where you peel back one layer and suddenly the whole global picture just shifts beneath your feet.
Totally. Okay, so picture this. Two world leaders, right? They are strolling past these gorgeous, 500-year-old trees in Beijing, exchanging seeds for Chinese roses.
Sounds perfectly serene, doesn't it?
It does. It looks like standard, highly choreographed diplomatic pageantry.
Yeah.
But behind closed doors, we're actually looking at a blueprint that trades American soybeans for the future of artificial intelligence.
It is wild.
It really is. We're thrilled you're here, because today's mission is unpacking the May 2026 summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping.
Right. And to do this justice, we are synthesizing some incredibly detailed analysis from Ty Roth and BBC News Thai.
Two fantastic sources.
Definitely. We are stepping past the official press releases to look at the cold, hard calculus of what actually happened at Zhangyanhai.
Yeah, the photos from Zhangyanhai, which is, the central headquarters for the Chinese government, they sell a story of unprecedented warmth.
Oh, for sure.
Trump was praising the welcome. She was playing the ultimate gracious host. But beneath all that aesthetic, we are analyzing a massive economic grand bargain.
Exactly. And according to the analysis from Tsinghua University professor Dao Wei, China arrived at this summit armed with a very deliberate buy strategy.
Buy. Okay.
Yeah, and that shopping list is just staggering in its scale. First, you have aviation. She committed to purchasing 200 Boeing airplanes.
Wait, 200?
200. I mean, Boeing went into these talks hoping to secure orders for maybe 150 aircraft.
Oh, so they overshot it.
Deliberately. China dumped a massive capital injection into American manufacturing, and they paired that with huge agricultural commitments, too.
Right, buying up vast quantities of American soybeans and beef.
Exactly. And perhaps most significantly for global markets, they're opening the floodgates to import U.S. oil, specifically from Texas, Louisiana, and Alaska.
Okay, let me stop and just push back on the political math here for a second.
Sure, worth that.
Trump's entire political brand, like the core of his appeal to his base, is built on being incredibly tough on China.
Right.
Protecting American industry, viewing trade as this zero-sum game. And Xi Jinping is, well, he's a brilliant strategist.
He absolutely is.
He is not just handing over a 200-plane deal and bailing out American farmers to play Santa Claus,
No, definitely not.
If China is dumping this much capital into swing state economies, the price tag on the other side of the ledger must be astronomical.
It is, but you have to look at what is physically missing from China's domestic supply chain to really wrap your head around their leverage. The cost of this shopping spree, it's microscopic in physical size, but it dictates the next century of global power.
We're talking about advanced computer chips, right?
Exactly. Specifically, the top-tier semiconductors manufactured by U.S. giants like NVIDIA.
Which is, that's the absolute bottleneck for the entire artificial intelligence industry.
Oh, without a doubt. And robotics and quantum computing and advanced military modeling.
Yeah.
The architecture of these specific chips allows for the massive parallel processing you need to train large language models and run complex AI.
Right. And right now, China simply cannot manufacture these chips domestically, at least not at the scale and sophistication they need.
Precisely. Because the U.S. has spent the last few years aggressively tightening export controls, they essentially walled off China's tech sector from the hardware required to compete in the AI arms race.
So Xi's objective in Beijing was to basically leverage American agricultural and manufacturing jobs to force those restrictions to be dropped.
Exactly. It's a literal transaction of soybeans and jetliners for the foundational building blocks of artificial intelligence.
That is fascinating. So Trump gets the immediate political ROI. He goes back to Washington, points to the Boeing plants and the Texas oil fields, and says, look at the exports I secured.
Right. It's a huge win for his base.
Meanwhile, Xi gets the technological keys to power the Chinese economy for the next 50 years.
Yeah, it is the definition of pragmatic diplomacy. There is no pretense here of shared democratic values or, ideological alignment.
No, not at all.
It is a sheer geopolitical marketplace.
Well, if she is willing to spend billions to unlock AI, He needs the energy infrastructure to power those massive new data centers, right?
Oh, absolutely. The fabrication plants alone require an unbelievable amount of energy.
And that brings us right back to the U.S. oil exports, which physically shifts the board for the next major global flashpoint.
The Middle East.
Exactly. Right now, we are looking at a severe global energy crisis tied to the region, specifically the closure of the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, that bottleneck.
The ripple effect of that is causing massive spikes in consumer prices, which is, well, it's a political nightmare for any sitting U.S. president.
It really is. Just for context, the Strait of Hormuz is this 21-mile-wide waterway.
It's super narrow.
Super narrow, but roughly 20% of the world's oil flows through it.
Wow.
So when it gets choked off, global supply chains instantly feel the pressure. And during the summit, Trump brought up Iran's role in destabilizing that region.
And Xi actually made a pledge on that.
And he did. It was highly calculated. He pledged that China will stop sending military equipment to Iran.
Which, I mean, that sounds like a massive diplomatic victory for the U.S. on paper.
On paper, yes, completely. But the nuance is in the economic leverage.
Okay, unpack that.
Well, Xi explicitly noted that China will continue buying Iranian oil. Because of heavy Western sanctions, Iran is largely cut off from global markets. China is one of the only major economic powers willing to buy their crude, which basically makes Beijing a monopsony. They are a single buyer dictating terms to a really desperate seller.
So because China holds the economic lifeline to Tehran, Xi offered to act as a mediator to reopen the Strait of Hormuz.
Exactly.
Okay, I want to try an analogy here. Tell me if this tracks the mechanism of what's happening.
Go for it.
It feels like China is acting as this massive, indispensable corporate client. You have an unruly, erratic supplier, which is Iran.
Right.
And you have the corporate client's biggest global rival, the U.S.
I like where this is going.
Instead of picking a side in the ideological fight, the massive client steps into the middle and says, look, I'm cutting off the weapons to the supplier, but I will negotiate a settlement between you two purely because I need the supply chain to keep moving.
That corporate mechanism is a perfect way to view it. I mean, China isn't stepping in to be a humanitarian peacemaker here.
Right. No Nobel Peace Prize ambitions.
Exactly. They are stepping in as a global supply chain manager. They need the oil flowing just as desperately as the U.S. wants the political headache of high gas prices to disappear.
Wow.
It's a temporary, highly functional partnership built entirely on mutual economic vulnerability.
But if Xi is taking steps to mediate Middle Eastern conflicts purely to secure his energy supply chain, it shows he is really trying to bulletproof China's broader economy.
Absolutely.
And he needs that economy insulated for what is happening 80 kilometers off his own coast.
Which brings us to Taiwan.
Yes, the core geopolitical ripple of this entire summit.
This is where the transactional framework we've been discussing meets its ultimate stress test.
Right, because if you listen to U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who was on this trip to Beijing, the official line is absolute continuity.
Yeah, he insists U.S. policy on Taiwan hasn't changed a millimeter.
The talking point is basically, China always brings up Taiwan, we firmly state our position, and we move on.
But the academic analysis, specifically from Associate Professor Dr. Dulipak Precharat at Thammasat University, paints a much darker, much more fluid reality behind the scenes.
Yeah, because the official diplomatic line has to project stability.
It has to.
But when analyzing foreign policy under the Trump administration, you really have to apply that same ROI framework we saw with the Boeing deal.
Right. Trump views international alliances fundamentally through the lens of return on investment.
He does.
He has historically been, well, deeply skeptical of spending massive amounts of U.S. taxpayer dollars to subsidize the defense of distant allies.
Right. He views alliances almost like a subscription service.
Yeah.
Like, what is Taiwan paying into the system to warrant the umbrella of the U.S. military?
Exactly. And Dr. Dulipak points out that the internal political dynamics within Taiwan make the calculation even more complex.
How so?
Well, it is not just a monolith of anti-Beijing sentiment over there. There are political factions and huge business interests within Taiwan that are heavily economically integrated with the mainland.
Oh, interesting. So they were actually open to compromising with Beijing.
Some of them, yes. And if Taiwan itself is divided on how aggressively to push back against China, well, it gives Washington internal cover to soften its own stance.
But hold on. I mean, abandoning Taiwan would be viewed as political suicide in D.C.?
Oh, completely.
It would signal to Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, that U.S. security guarantees are entirely for sale. Are the sources actually suggesting the U.S. is going to just walk away from Taiwan just to secure NVIDIA chips and soybean exports?
Well, no, it won't be a dramatic abandonment. It will be a slow, quiet recalibration of leverage.
A recalibration.
Right. If China is actively restraining military support for Russia or Iran, doing the U.S. a massive strategic favor, they demand reciprocity on Taiwan.
Oh, I see.
The U.S. won't tear up its treaties, but they might quietly reduce the volume of defensive weapons sold to Taipei.
Right. Or they might deliberately delay the delivery of crucial missile systems, or tone down the rhetoric on naval patrols.
Exactly. It is a mutual yanking on the leash to preserve the broader economic grand bargain they just struck.
So it is a calculated stand down. But we have to look at what happens if this fragile diplomacy shatters.
Yeah, that's the scary part.
Because the sources detail a specific military scenario regarding Taiwan, and it completely bypasses the idea of, like, a chaotic D-Day style amphibious invasion across the beaches.
Yeah, a direct amphibious assault is incredibly costly, it's highly visible, and it risks immediate catastrophic escalation.
Right.
The far more pragmatic and devastating threat analyzed here is a blockade.
Ball blockade.
Yes. China possesses the naval capacity to simply encircle the island of Taiwan. They don't have to launch a single missile at Taipei.
They just park their fleet and tighten the noose.
Yeah. And the mechanics of that are terrifying when you look at Taiwan's logistics.
Because they import basically everything, right?
Exactly. Taiwan imports nearly 98% of its energy. If you throw a naval blockade around the island, you aren't just cutting off the export of their advanced semiconductors.
You are literally turning the lights off.
You are starring the grid without firing a shot.
Wow. And a blockade shifts the entire burden of escalation onto the United States.
It does. By closing off the Taiwan Strait, China effectively asserts control over the East China Sea and massive portions of the South China Sea.
Leaving the U.S. 7th Fleet suddenly boxed into a strategic nightmare.
Because to break the blockade, the U.S. Navy has to fire the first shot.
Exactly the dilemma. If the U.S. Navy attempts to escort an oil tanker through a Chinese blockade and they fire on a Chinese vessel to do it, Washington absorbs the blame for starting World War III.
But if they don't fire, Taiwan is slowly, methodically choked into submission.
It puts the U.S. in an almost impossible competitive position.
This is exactly why preserving a functional, transactional relationship with Beijing, even if it means making painful concessions on arms sales, is viewed by some analysts as the only way to keep the blockade scenario off the table.
Okay, so we have these two absolute titans sitting at a table in Zhongnanhai, trading global flashpoints to protect their own vulnerabilities.
Yeah, it's like, I'll stabilize the Middle East so your gas prices drop, you back off the Taiwan Strait.
Right, I'll buy your planes, you give me the AI hardware. But when the U.S. and China carve up the globe into these massive, pragmatic trades, what happens to the countries caught in the middle?
That is the million-dollar question, and it creates a fascinating survival mechanism for middle powers.
Like Thailand.
Right. Our sources use Thailand as a primary case study for how to navigate a world where superpowers operate entirely on transactional leverage.
Thailand is in a deeply precarious spot. I mean, they have long-standing security ties with the U.S., but massive economic integration with China. How do they survive the crush of the tectonic plates?
By formalizing a strategy of aggressive neutrality.
Aggressive neutrality.
Yeah. Officially, Thailand adheres to the One China policy, recognizing Beijing's sovereignty. But simultaneously, they maintain highly lucrative non-political, economic, and cultural ties with Taiwan.
Playing both sides, basically.
Essentially. The analysis from Thai-Rath details how middle powers can elevate this neutrality from a defensive crouch into a proactive framework. They call it the 3C strategy.
The 3C strategy. Okay, let's unpack the mechanics of this. What is the first pillar?
The first C is crossroad. Thailand physically and diplomatically positions itself as the unavoidable intersection where superpowers must meet.
Oh, I see.
You invest in infrastructure, logistics, and digital connectivity so that whether it is a Chinese supply chain or an American tech firm, they have to route through your territory. You make your geography indispensable.
You become the toll booth on the global highway. That makes sense. What is the second step?
The second C is connector. This involves actively leveraging regional blocks. Instead of dealing with Washington or Beijing as a solitary, vulnerable nation, you act as the bridge between the superpowers and the broader neighborhood.
Right.
You become the essential translator and facilitator for regional trade blocs, amplifying your own leverage by representing the collective market.
Crossroad and connector. Building infrastructure and acting as a regional broker. Wing with the logic so far. What is the final C?
The final C is conductor, and this requires actively creating platforms and neutral spaces to resolve hot-button conflicts between the superpowers themselves.
Okay, I have to challenge the reality of that last point.
Fair enough.
I understand building roads and hosting trade summits, but stepping up as a conductor to orchestrate peace between two nuclear-armed giants fighting over AI dominance and naval blockades.
That sounds like a lot, yeah.
If a middle power tries to stand between two grinding tectonic plates, aren't they just going to get crushed?
It seems like a massive overreach until you look at the psychology of the transactional diplomacy we've been discussing. In a world where ideological loyalty is dead and everything is a negotiation, genuine trust does not exist.
Which means they can't negotiate in each other's living rooms.
Exactly the point. If Trump and Xi need to negotiate an incredibly sensitive de-escalation in the South China Sea, they cannot do it in Washington. They cannot do it in Beijing. They need a broker. They need a geographical space that is secure, where neither side loses face by traveling to the other's capital, and where the rooms aren't heavily bugged by opposing intelligence agencies.
Wow. So if a country like Thailand can execute the role of the conductor, providing that pristine, neutral back channel, they aren't just surviving the superpower clash.
No, they're making their own sovereignty essential to global stability.
They turn neutrality into a highly valued commodity. They become like the Switzerland of the Asian century.
Exactly.
You guarantee your own security by ensuring both giants need your territory intact just to speak to one another.
It is the ultimate pragmatic defense in a transactional era.
Well, pulling all of these threads together from this deep dive into the May 2026 summit, the overarching theme here is a total, undeniable paradigm shift.
Huge shifts.
We have completely exited the era of ideological tension. The old framework of democracy versus autocracy is a relic. We are officially operating in the era of the calculated grand bargain.
Yeah, the board is entirely legible if you read it as a ledger. It is a geopolitical marketplace where every single strategic asset is up for negotiation.
We are swapping actual agricultural yields for the processing power that will build the next generation of artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
We are trading diplomatic mediation in the Persian Gulf for calculated leverage over the Taiwan Strait. And the reason this matters deeply to you listening right now is that the agreements signed over tea at Zhangyanhai dictate the immediate reality of your daily life.
The effects are instantaneous. When two superpowers prioritize supply chains over ideology, it dictates the cost of shipping every good you consume.
Exactly.
It dictates the price of the energy required to heat your home. It determines the availability of the electronics you rely on. The macro-level horse trading in Beijing physically alters the microeconomics of your local grocery store.
It forces you to consume international news through a completely different lens. You stop listening to the rhetoric about moral high grounds, and you start looking for the underlying transaction. You start looking at who holds the leverage, who needs the energy, and what the real hidden price tag is for global stability.
Because in this new diplomatic architecture, literally everything has a price tag.
Which leaves us with a lingering, somewhat unsettling thought to close on.
Oh boy.
If the current world order is entirely dependent on transactional diplomacy, where arms sales, AI dominance, and island blockades are just items on a balance sheet, what happens when the next massive global crisis is something that a 200-plane Boeing deal or a shipment of Texas oil simply cannot buy off?
When the ledger fails, the stability shatters.
Something to carefully consider as you watch the headlines this week. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. We'll be back next time to unpack another stack of research. Until then, keep questioning the mechanics behind the news.